All right.
We'll come up with a better title when the episode's done. I'm sure we'll have something else to call it.
For sure. I think next, like after September, I'm gonna maybe pester you guys to like look into some higher quality audio options.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Terrible, but
You mean like in terms of microphones?
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I still really faded?
Your sound?
Yeah.
It's a little quieter, but not too much.
I mean, should I like lean in like this or?
Sorry, Marty, what did you say?
Should I lean in or is it loud enough?
I think you're okay right now.
Okay.
It's funny you said lean in because isn't that the motto of MSNBC?
Oh, probably.
Which is the topic of our talk tonight. So at least
did you plan that, Marty? You planned that.
I think he did.
You plugged that.
I wish I was smart enough to plan that.
I'm not seeing your video there, Mary Kate.
What video?
The YouTube.
The link?
Yeah.
All right, I can send the link to you guys. It should be, can't you pull the link from the actual Zoom?
I wouldn't know how to do that. Oh, there it is. Never mind. I think we're live.
Well, just in case here.
There we are.
Oh, we're live right now.
We are live right
now.
Nice.
I guess one of us should, I'll post this on Facebook since.
Hey, David Ellett.
Usually. David Ellett's here?
Yeah.
He sure is, yeah.
Stranger. Haven't seen much of David Ellett since we quit Slack. All right.
That's right.
Please hold. I feel kind of unprepared today, you guys.
Don't admit that.
We're live. What are you doing?
We're live. That's what you say before we start.
I mean, whatever.
It's a good topic idea.
Don't worry, Zach and I have a lot of filler content tonight.
Perfect. That's literally all we need is just exclusively filler content. We hit 300. Oh no, did we? I think we hit 300 likes on Facebook. We have exactly 300 likes on Facebook.
Wow. 300 likes, nice.
Man,
but only 299 follows.
Not gonna work.
Yeah, so somebody liked the page and then didn't want it in their feed, which I personally find offensive, but maybe that's just me. Okay, does anyone want to lead us in prayer?
I can't wear my glasses. This is bothering me.
Then you want to lead us in prayer?
Sure. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the opportunity to join here together. We ask that you guide our conversation. Help us all to learn something. Keep us all close to Our Lady. And may she wrap us in her mantle as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. The Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen. So, like half of us are at our parents' houses, right? Why? Like
basically.
Why? Well, okay. So the seminarians, because you guys are like when do you guys actually go back?
It depends. We're kind of, me and Tim have to be back for diaconate ordinations for Chicago on the 12th.
Yeah.
Oh,
and Tim has to stay for ordination. We just found out we had to quarantine for 2 weeks at Monday.
Oh, wow.
You do.
Which is, basically it just means if we leave our rooms, we have to have masks on and we can't leave the campus. So it's actually, and a week of that is our silent retreat. So we weren't going to do that anyway.
Oh, you're not even going to notice then that you're quarantining.
No.
Yeah.
John, what about you? Are you just like decided to go back to Ohio for?
No, my sister got married actually. So.
Fun. Oh my gosh. Congrats to your sister. Was that this last weekend?
It was just Saturday.
Dang.
So
that's so exciting.
It was really funny too. There was this, you know how in the dance, they have the, like, you know, if you've been married for 5 years, sit down, 10 years, sit down. We had this like 93-year-old, like really old couple that was left standing. And they were partying it up the whole night without
Oh my
masks.
gosh, that's so funny. Without masks?
Yeah, nobody had
Oh
If
my
you've
masks
been
on.
married for 80 years, keep standing.
That's awesome. Oh man, congrats to your sister. That's so cool.
It's awesome, man.
Nice. Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, I'm happy for her. So
Too bad
So
you have to come home
that's-
soon and hang out with us.
yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. When do you get back?
Thursday.
Oh, nice. Cool. So you have to quarantine? Ohio's not on the list, I don't think.
No, there's not really a problem here.
Cool.
But they
He wouldn't anyway.
what's that? No,
I
you're
said
right.
you wouldn't quarantine anyway.
Probably wouldn't, no. Not unless someone forced me, but
I mean, I probably wouldn't either. So.
We're gonna barricade you in your room when you come back.
Yeah,
So you
you're
know.
gonna be stuck.
I don't know.
Cool. Nice. So today's topic is how to consume media with a Catholic approach mindset. We kind of talked about this in like I think it was either our second or our third episode. We kind of talked about this. I think we could go a little deeper today, and I think we will, talking not just about like the news. And I think there's a lot to be said, especially right now with everything that's going on. I think there's a lot to be said with regards to how we can consume the media well, but also like one of the other topics that came up, and it sounds like maybe you guys want it to be mentioned too, is consuming like entertainment media, like movies, TV shows. And again, I think things we've mentioned or touched on at some point over the last 15 weeks. That's insane. So yeah, anyway, I mean, first, like introductory question. Where do you guys, generally speaking, get your media from? So like, for example, Kevin is on Twitter a lot. I would assume, Kevin, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I would assume that Kevin gets a lot of your news, entertainment, internet entertainment, whatever, from Twitter. So
Yes.
Where do you guys actually get your media from? Whether it's good or not.
I mean,
Who's
just
gonna be the first one to fall on the sword?
Well, I'll be the second one.
Yeah. Go ahead, Marty. What were you going to say?
So I pretty much watch YouTube. That's where I get most of my entertainment media. I mean, we don't have cable or satellite TV here. We don't really watch too many movies. You know, obviously can't go to the movies anymore. So a lot of it's YouTube stuff. I don't know. I used to have this joke. I was, do I choose my YouTube algorithm or does it choose me? I don't know. So it's,
That's funny.
Maybe that's more of a philosophical thing about, what is directing my, my public opinion, right? Is it my YouTube
Interesting.
algorithm feeding me videos, or, am I choosing things? But yeah, mostly YouTube. I don't know. That's me.
That's wow. You just like kind of blew my mind. Do I choose my YouTube algorithm or does it choose me? Because you're an audience. You are a particular demographic audience. So that's super interesting. What about the rest of you guys?
Chooses you, by the way.
Yeah,
Definitely
just to be clear.
The one chooses the wizard, Harry.
Right. And if you've been
We don't-
watching
I'm sorry,
TCI,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Well, John's not here to tell us to watch.
No
another
Harry Potter.
movie.
No, I was actually
Read
just going to
another
say,
book.
It's an
no Harry
interesting
Potter.
question,
Read
though,
another book.
because
No Harry Potter references are allowed. Anyways.
If you think about
Oh,
it, like,
man.
say for example, I am sort of in a demographic, right? In certain, articles or video clips are sent to me.
you're
Does that
super
then
white.
reinforce the fact that I'm in that group? Does that begin to form my opinion in that way? Because that's the media I'm getting catered to what demographic I supposedly am, right? I don't know. Food for thought.
Yes, I have more thoughts about that, but I want to
Move
circle
on.
back. I want to circle back on that. What about the rest of you guys? I didn't
gotta
expect anyone
confess,
to
I
say
don't
exclusively YouTube. I'm sorry, John, go ahead. What did you say?
I was gonna say I've got to confess I don't like really consistently read the news. Like there's not a certain time of the day that I'll read the news,
Okay.
but when I do read the news, I like for some reason to just know what most people are reading.
Mhm.
So I'll actually go back and forth between Fox and CNN and some of the main like church news sites. And so I don't necessarily, I try to read with some, not suspicion, but just critically reading it. But yeah, I'm just curious, like what most people are hearing. Not that I know better than everyone else or something, but just yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Say for myself, I'm a pretty watery mix of just about everything because, and part of it is honestly like I don't keep up with. Well, I'm kind of forced into keeping up the news because honestly, at work the TV's on all the time, and it's always on. It depends on who's at the station. So some people turn on Fox News and then it's always swiftly changed to CNN. But WGN News is always on in the morning and I cannot stand it. It is awful. I'll just say that.
WGN.
It's
What's wrong with WGN
oh,
News?
it's so irritating. It's so obnoxious.
Tom
Except when
Stearns,
they've got some funny stuff, I guess, but it's just, it's yeah. Anyways, so a little bit of mix of everything, and I'm kind of the same. I hop around on different news sites throughout the day. I really only consistently read church news. I don't really keep up with politics a whole lot anymore because it just, I'm one of those sensitive guys who either get really irritated by everything I'm seeing or, kind of depressed in a way. And it could be that way in church news too, but I more consistently read church news than keeping up with secular media for sure.
Yeah. Kev, Tim?
I go in and out of these like seasons of media consumption. Right now, just like Marty, like it's pretty much exclusively YouTube. Every once in a while, I'll take a look at Twitter and whatever pops up on Facebook. But most of the time, it's YouTube. And a lot of, because I've been trying to get more onto like trying to find independent journalists, more so for like international things going on. And it also kind of depends on like what's going on in the world. Like if it's a slow news month, then it's like, whatever, I'm gonna focus on other things. But if stuff's going on in the world, then suddenly you're more interested, you're looking at other sites. But yeah, right now I'd say mostly YouTube actually is my my choice of poison.
Kev?
You already said it. It's Twitter is probably where I get the most. In a former lifetime, I was a big time Redditor, so I would go on Reddit, and that's where I probably got most of my news. From it's from all over the place, but it's possibly the most toxic place on the internet besides me. I mean, unlike the common web. I mean, if you go into like 4chan and like deeper web stuff, then
web.
Yeah, it gets a little more weird, but I would say that's where I used to get it. And then I'd say Twitter now. And of course the Twitter is, amalgamates all this different stuff. So it's I'll see stuff from Fox, from CNN. I mean, I probably actually nowadays, I mean, to continue from last week, I probably have a lot of the Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. I probably have those all blocked. And so like it's
that's not what I expected you to say. I thought you were about to say that you read Fox, and I was going to be like, tell me more.
Wow,
that's really interesting.
Oh yeah, that's not the case at all. No, so like there's a little news thing on the side of like, if there's big things, and I'm with Tim with like if it's like, I have a tendency of like if there's a big news story, and this dates back to like 9/11. If there's a big news story, I am attached to the TV. I mean, so like it's hard for me to think about like 9/11 now without seeing what's his face, Peter Jennings. Like I could like I remember like crying like on the news, like just like it was like at the end of the day I was like it was so much. But but like in slow news, I just it's pretty it's a thing. But like
that was the age when you grew up with a broadcaster.
Right. It was a thing. I had Tom Brokaw, Dan
Rather.
You guys are so older than me.
Oh yeah, we're so much older.
I was in like fourth grade when 9/11 happened. I was not watching the news.
Wow.
But that's interesting. So Kev, why'd you stop reading Reddit?
Oh, it's completely toxic. I mean, it's because it was you would your page. I mean, you could. I mean, it's like Twitter. You could like curate your pages by following all these different I can't remember what they actually call them, like just groups, channels. I don't remember what the actual thing is. But it was just, I mean, you would of course get into the comments, and it was just.
I mean, that's pretty much what Reddit is, right? It's just like people posting.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah, that's and so someone would post the story, and then it would be, comments, and then you could comment on threads, and it'd be threads within threads, and all this stuff. So,
I don't even know what is 4chan. I've heard it.
4chan is not it's like the predecessor to Reddit. It was just like it's an internet forum that has all these different channels, but like all the original like I'm talking about like original memes and original like all the like that stuff like that. It would start on 4chan. It would like leak over into Reddit, and then like Facebook, when all like Facebook and social media became a bigger thing, then it would like go onto them. So
interesting. All right.
Don't go there. Don't ever, please, if anyone I guess anything from this episode, never ever type into your search engine 4chan.com. Would never.
I'm going there right now.
Zach's already on every list, so you might as well get on the
4chan
too, Zach.
Did you mean Jackie Chan? No, 4chan.
So that's interesting. Kev, first of all, I'm very interested to hear that two of you said primarily YouTube. Second of all, I'm really intrigued by the fact that Kevin used to be a Redditor. Maybe I did know that.
Every saint has a past, Mary Kate. Every saint has a past.
Okay, so I personally was never a religious Redditor, but it was one of those things that like my friend sent it to me in 2016. A really good friend of mine was obsessed with the Donald page in 2016 and sent it to me at one point. And so we used to just read it obsessively and text about it all the time. And I realized like within a couple of weeks that like, this is not good for me. And I nixed it, but.
Remember the Catholic Reddit was kind of rough too.
Oh,
suck you right in.
Catholic Reddit is actually what made me quit. What made me
Really?
leave Reddit
Made you angry.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like, there was nothing fun about it. Like there was like every so often there would be I know we're straying from our main topic, but every so often most of the time it would be people asking whether one of their sins was a sin. Like, and it's like, be like, dude, go to a priest.
Is this a sin?
Yeah. And pretty much every time it was, but like, don't go to the internet to figure this out for you. Like, go to a priest. And then it would be, there'd be some cool like Catholic art posted, but then it was very rad trad. So like there'd be a lot of stuff bashing the Pope. There'd be stuff, supporting these, St. Vacantus groups, and it was just not a healthy place. It was very, built. So there's, these well-known. I mean, Twitter's kind of the same thing, but like these well-known commenters that everyone would kind of like wait with bated breath to like, what is this, what is so and so going to say, as if that person has any sort of authority or extra something. So
as we currently do now, we like all sit on our sit on the edge of our seats waiting for Barron and Taylor Marshall to make comments about
for sure
stuff.
And expand that
said
out.
the TM words.
I know. I did it on purpose.
No.
Go ahead, Kev.
I'm ignoring that. I think you can expand it out to a news media of like you waiting to hear what any sort of political pundit, what the network's going to say, how it's going to what's going to get twisted, like how is this going to be presented by Fox News, New York Times, MSNBC, like everyone's just like waiting to see how these things are, and they take into your favorite method of receiving that, and it's I mean, some people like can't move forward until they know what Tucker Carlson has to say on some object, and all of a sudden then they hear it and then they have an opinion. Oh, imagine that.
So that's a good, I guess that's a good
the same
segue.
with Rachel Maddow. I mean, like it's it's the same.
It's true. It is the same. But that's a good point, because everyone has like a different source that they look to as like, I can trust this source.
And Zach said, I will, like, oftentimes, like, Bishop Barron is someone who I very much trust. One, he's a bishop of the Catholic Church, but two, he just very smart and very articulate, and there's a lot of things that I followed him for a while, so like things that he says I'm generally going to to trust. And I'm kind of like, you're always
Sure.
kind of curious to see what he's going to take. And everyone has to has that person. Choosing that person. I mean, am I more correct choosing someone like Bishop Barron and another person choosing Michael Voorhees? I mean,
yeah, we kind of broached this discussion last night at Will's.
We did.
The tavern.
Love Will's, even though it's a Packers bar.
Dude, great badger stained window. Beautiful.
You have stuffed
it's a good
turtles
bar.
as well.
Stuffed turtles,
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
Everything you can imagine.
What is
So we kind of broached this
turtles?
conversation last night talking about how everybody's got their own, everybody's got this pundit that they latch onto, or like a couple people, and kind of, all just leveled with each other and, kind of made it clear that being human, obviously there's just a certain level of fallibility that comes with any sort of news and and there's always a bias that comes with any sort of, news that you're intaking. And so it can get pretty dangerous pretty quickly if you find yourself latching onto this person and then you just listen to everything they say without question, whichever side of the spectrum you're on, it doesn't really matter. The danger exists no matter what.
What I like to do when I'm reading articles or even listening to videos, it's harder with videos, but like to just kind of figure out in your head, list what the factual claims are that they're making before trying to decide whether you agree with the conclusions. Because a lot of it, you get different amounts of opinions or conclusions versus the facts, and then try to, if there are citations for the factual claims, like that's a really helpful thing. And I get suspicious if I don't see citations,
Yeah.
So, but then, and then I think you ought to be able to come to if it's well done, you ought to be able to come to the conclusion that they have come to in the article or the video, So
yeah, or at least have a greater understanding of the topic at large, whether or not you agree with them 100%, or, it doesn't mean that everything that's presented is airtight all the time. But yeah, you should have something you could point back to as evidence in following one of these theories or something,
Yep.
The other things I find kind of interesting and makes me sort of trust someone a little more or less is whether or not they claim to be objective. So I've often found that the folks that I trust more the folks that lay their biases out in the front and say, okay, I'm going to have a liberal bias or a conservative bias. And then you kind of know what you're getting into. I don't know. I'm always a little bit more suspicious of we are X network. We're always just
fair and balanced.
Yeah. Well,
like the Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness. That's
yeah.
my favorite. I love when I see that on there.
Or Al Jazeera, or, the so-called neutral.
Right. So, and I mean, I don't know if there is an unbiased source out there. I mean, unless you're like reading, just maybe the Associated Press or something, just straight facts, or I don't even know, maybe even those guys have a bias, but I don't know. So I tend to follow folks who are, outline where their biases is coming from. So at least you've got that starting point.
Yeah.
I mean, so John, you kind of went into this in detail, and Marty, I guess you're sort of broaching it, but how do you guys actually, like, when you're reading an article or watching a video on YouTube, what are the things that raise flags for you? Like, is there anything in particular, or do you have like a prevailing philosophy on like, this is the litmus test for me in how I discern like whether something is consistent with the truth or not?
I mean, one way is to find, if you do even find one thing that's been manipulated, that'll discredit, for me, the source. So that's why I mentioned the facts, the citations. Like, if you have a whole article about how so and so murdered this person or something like that, and then you actually look at the citation and it tells multiple other sites are telling us the same story, but it's like not put in that perspective, like that'll at the least just make me kind of suspend my judgment about it.
Sure.
So, but it gets so it can like it gets stressful and time, or not stressful, but it gets time consuming to filter. Just
For
like
sure.
we were talking last week with social media or whatever, there's just so much information that you really have to do the work, I guess.
Yeah, that's for sure true.
Similar to that is like parsing out the tone of an article and like how they approach who they're like their indirect objects, like the people who they're talking about.
Mhm.
It's one thing to say, Zach Castorano said this at this meeting or whatever, and trying to put it as plain facts, and then but all the time, and it seems ever more so occurring now than ever before, it'll say something to the extent of like, oh, Zach Castorano, the mansplaining bigot, said blah blah blah. And so they're like what do you call it? It's like
they're like
prepping,
personifying or whatever.
Yeah, personifying, but they're also like putting a certain, almost like a kind of judgment on his character by putting those types of adjectives and identifiers onto him as a person in their articles. And it's exhausting, trying, like, you find a headline that you're interested in and then you read and it's like, I don't even know if I can trust this,
Which is just like point blank bad journalism. Like that's like journalism 101 is like that you don't put into the story your own read on the situation or like your own perspective, but like
everything you see nowadays too. I mean,
100%.
Like that's everything you see, I mean, it's even as simple as like it or not, whether you love the guy or hate the guy, you can immediately tell a bias in an article that starts off by identifying him as Trump rather than President Trump. Or, I mean, like, it's the same thing that would have happened for Obama, on the conservative side when he
for sure.
Like, that's all you've got nowadays. It's just some of these articles are just oozing with the bias before you ever even, even break it into what the content's all about.
What if, for example, somebody does use that sort of language or tone, as you want to call it, and it's all over the article, but they make it very clear at the beginning of the article, or the site is known for this, that they have this bias. So no, they're not claiming to be objective in any way. I don't know. Maybe I'm an outlier here, but I tend to not necessarily discount an article because of tone if I understand the point of view ahead of time. Now, if an organization is coming out and saying, oh, we are, the fair and balanced, and then I start hearing all of this, tone or adjectives, then I get a little bit suspicious.
Well, I think to your point, Marty, like, I think that we kind of entered into an age with regards to media that like, fair and unbalanced, not only is it not the default, it's also not what people really want or are looking for. So like when people, because I mean, we live in like the clickbait age, right? That like everyone's competing for clicks, and the clicks with like getting clicks on your link as opposed to other links is really about A, knowing your audience and knowing what they want to hear, and B, doing it in a way that communicates a particular angle, regardless of whether or not it's true, because everybody loves the drama, like reality TV era. Everybody loves the drama.
In other words, it's not about the truth. Yeah.
I don't think it's about the truth. I mean, because here's the thing, like it's not like these publications are nonprofits. Like they are all operating on like they have to make money. So how do we compete?
They're aware, like the current statistics too are that, I mean, I don't remember what the exact figure was, but it's an abysmally low figure of people who actually read an entire article nowadays.
Totally.
Like, nobody reads an entire article of anything.
I'm sure that's true.
We're interested in the subject and very honest,
So yeah, so now it's really about like, how can we compete with all these other publications and not only deliver the article, the headline, really, you're really selling a headline is what you're selling, because once they click at that point, like scrolls are just more money, but like that initial click is worth the most. So, I mean, I think it's like,
you need to have the right lure. It's just like fishing. You need to have the right lure in order to attract the fish.
Yep. That is literally exactly true. Yeah,
And
I don't know. I think that's interesting.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's anything necessarily wrong with that as long as the content is good, right? And it's truthful. So, who cares if it's a great, well-written headline that draws you in? We're more concerned about like when you get to the body of the work, right? Is it true? Is it meaningful? So
I mean, yes and no. On the one hand, I think you're right in saying that, like, okay, these organizations are profit, they're money-making businesses. They have to make money, they have to compete in order to thrive and be successful. So yeah, that's fine. Like, do what you have to do to compete. But I think the point that Zach's making with that research point is like, people don't even get into the actual body of the text far enough to read the whole story. They're really only reading the headline and maybe like the first 4 or 5 sentences. Really the question, I mean, like, I think the thing that a lot of publications are really pursuing is, first of all, that initial click, but then also, is this shareable? Like, are people going to share this article because that's reach, right? So like, are people going to share this article once they've clicked on it? So people are deciding whether or not they're going to share an article on Facebook or Twitter within the first 5 sentences. If they don't find the first 5 sentences appealing, they're not going to share it. And then it's only worth that one person to that publication. So, I mean, Marty, to your point, like, I agree with you. In theory, I'm not necessarily saying that they are doing anything wrong, but I think in its very nature, like, the way that we as a society consume media is problematic, because it's so, not only is it like profit seeking, it's also like, we are all inherently seeking affirmation of our own beliefs.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to share something that doesn't affirm what I already believe.
Well, so that's, oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say that there's another problem. I think you're right, Mary Kate, and that there's another problem that follows from that, which is, for me, the most, like, probably the most concerning in this whole thing, and that's like the focus on the fact that, or the observation that everyone has a bias from, by the way that they present a story. And it's concerning because it leads other people to the belief that, like, in a subjectivist, like, view of the world, where there is no real truth. Like, there's just
Right.
your perspective, my perspective. We can all just, we'll all never agree. There's no real one right way to report the story. So I just want to hope that there is a news source out there that, or not a single one, but there is a way to neutrally and correctly present the story. I think that's important.
Yeah.
And it's not just a matter of, like, again, using the truth as a club. It's not.
So how do you do that though? I mean, it's, no matter what, like, the facts you're presenting are, like, you're choosing what facts to present. So even if it's truthful, like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this thing. I mean, omitting facts, and you can always say, well, I can't put in every single aspect of the story. Like, you can't do that in a news article. It's presenting facts about the story, but, like, you can go from including things about, race, religion, all these things. Like, what's the thing of, like, how do you do a truly unbiased article?
Well, I think it comes down to, like, if you say a sentence that's true, I know what you're saying. Like, there's 2 ways to be false, right? You can leave out the truth, or you can positively say something that's false, or you can not give enough truth, right? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to, like, subjective interpretation and choosing what you present, like, at the very minimum, you should be able to say sentences that obtain that they're true, and even if, like, if I say Joe killed Bob or something, like, whatever comes to your mind is going to be different than what came into my mind, like, in terms of our perceptions or what we think of. That doesn't mean that it's a subjective statement, right? So we just want to make sure, at least, that you've got positively true statements, and then you try to give, I think, as much truth as you can to the scenario. But
that is kind of an interesting mental exercise, I guess, though, because, like, Kev, I'm thinking about, like, what if one of us was a journalist, either me or you? I would bet that on a like a fundamental level, totally outside of like whether or not either of us was trying to push a particular agenda, I would bet that there would be details of particular stories that you and I would see. I would prioritize certain details over some of the details you would prioritize.
Totally.
You know, and that's not because either of us is neglecting truth in this area or that area so much as it is not even so much a difference of perspective, but you and I, well, I guess this is perspective, but to say it in a better way, you and I just by nature being two different human beings see the world a little differently than each other.
And I mean, there's not, and that's, I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with it, because I mean, get the Gospels, there's 4 Gospels from 4 different perspectives, and we're not going to sit here and say like, well, those are those all those are well, that one they all have different things. They were written for different audiences, written at different times, written with obviously different perspectives. They talk to different people. I mean, probably, you know, yeah, and well, I'm not going to get into that, but like just they had different sources and that they talked to, and compiling the Gospels,
or
and
they just observe different details.
Exactly. And so I think it's just I've always been fascinated with like the, you know, the desire to have this unbiased news source, and that's why I think Marty's really onto something of like when you put it out there saying like here's I know the angle that you're coming at, and I'm admitting this is the angle that I'm coming with, then I think that's better than saying like I'm than like telling people I am an objective news source. I'm fair and balanced. I'm you know, I'm not letting democracy die in the dark. Like all those taglines for those different organizations that, you know, it's they try to be like, oh yeah, no, don't worry, we would never dare you know, twist the truth. No, get out of here. That's what just it's the humanity of it, of human beings reporting on human beings. So
question then, follow-up question to this. This is really interesting. I did not expect us to go this direction. So to what extent do you guys think in general, like forget the actual perspective, forget the actual content of the article, to what extent is it a little bit disingenuous to claim no bias when all of us as human beings inherently have a bias? Is that untruthful in and of itself?
I think you probably could do it. I don't know of any organizations out there that are doing it. But one way would be to have, you know, an equal number of staff writers who are very upfront about their beliefs right up front. And you've got 4 very conservative, 4 very liberal, and then the network can say we're fair and balanced, right? We have staffed, and here's all our beliefs right out front, and these are the op-eds are going to, you know, be this direction. The main news sources are, you know, they're going to agree on various points. I think it can be done. I've just never heard of a network that actually employs people that way.
So again, that's interesting. I would charge, based on the fact that my bias, I believe my bias is consistent with, my bias is like my bias falls where I see the truth. Yeah, it's where I believe the truth is. Right. So I would charge that the reason we don't see a lot of that is that inevitably it comes down to editors, administrators, whatever, observing from the top writers and reporters who might be reporting from different angles or different biases than them, but they see certain biases that are oppositional to their own, and they see it as in opposition to truth. And they feel like there's a moral problem at play here because I am inevitably promoting a voice that I do not believe is consistent with the truth.
Can I make a
statement
here? I don't know if this might be a nitpicking or something, but I don't know if I want to agree that everyone has a bias.
Okay.
So just because the way I understand bias is that you intentionally present you present information with in an unfair way.
That's not really how I see bias, but go ahead, John, keep your, just for the sake of your point. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't, I think what happens a lot of the times in media and these different articles and the information is that a lot of people don't feel the need to explain how they got to their conclusions, their previous conclusions in other articles or whatever else. But in theory, all of them should have reasons, you know, and so, but people are jumping into the conversation in the middle of it. And so this is in the best case scenario, people have reasons for their opinions. But the way I thought of bias is just that they present a conclusion with maybe a desire for it to be true. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should look it up. I'm sorry.
We're not technically supposed to do this here, but I looked up the definition of the word
Oh
bias.
gosh.
I know.
We're
just
really
this is
going
real
down bad
time.
places.
It says prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. So if we're going to be technical,
Okay.
that is, yeah, the way John couched it there is correct.
I guess, see, I guess I struggle with that because maybe bias is just the wrong word. I know that if I were writing about anything, I would have a slant in a particular direction. Okay, I would have a slant in a more conservative direction because my views, like I believe that truth falls closer to the line of conservatism than it does liberalism in the American politics sense. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's
You wouldn't
interesting.
spend as much time explaining
what's
various things, you know, that because
Yeah.
you would assume that your audience is maybe somewhat more conservative. So
right.
Unless
So
anyone's
here's-
watching from National Catholic Reporter, hi.
Hey, that's
Guys-
I was literally
Jason,
just
find
gonna
yourself
say,
here.
I was actually just gonna
I'm
say.
not allowed to talk to you.
You still there?
So so we've adequately expressed people are coming from different perspectives, whether you want to call that bias or not. People are coming from different perspectives. They, you know, communicate the news based on where they feel the truth lies. Inevitably, some people will see truth falling in a different place than others will. So in theory, that's not necessarily a problem in and of itself, but let's talk for a second about like Catholic media. I guess we'll use like good NCR and bad NCR as an example.
Well, and just right there, we just did it. Right there, we just
I know we did it.
Yeah.
That's my point. That's our bias.
you're not
And maybe
wrong.
that is unfair.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Maybe that
There's
is
bad
unfair.
NCR and good NCR. I mean, it's
But so that's exactly. But I guess that's
there's a reason we call it bad versus good.
why. So why? Like that's what I want to dive into is like why.
One takes doctrine and dogma and plays with it like a little toy thing and bends it to its will, and one stays pretty close to it, maybe bends it a little wrong in the other direction, but like it does not play things loose and fast like the Reporter does. I'm not going to call it the bad one, but
I think like it sort of depends on like where your standard of truth lies. So like we'll say.
Can we read some of their articles?
No, I'm not allowed to. I told you, I'm not allowed.
Is
to
that the website? I thought so, Kev.
Oh
Go
yeah,
ahead,
sorry, I
Marty, what were you
should
saying?
have outed it, but yeah, that is the one.
Sorry, Marty. What were you saying?
Okay. So for example, like the Reporter, they have Catholic in their name, right? And they've been around for a long time, almost 40, 50 years now. And, the bishops
that you know that.
told them that they had to take Catholic out of their name decades ago.
Mhm.
And they were disobedient, never did.
Oh, really?
So
I didn't know that.
just from the get-go, that they're
Oh.
appealing to a Catholic crowd, but they don't really care about what the bishops say. So like, it's hypocrisy. So like
super interesting.
Whereas I don't know, we'll call it the Register. You don't hear stories like that. So you can sort of go to the company's philosophy and sort of see and pick out hypocrisy and find out, begin to categorize things that way.
That's super interesting. So, but like we know people who read the Reporter and are like, yeah, this is the truth. Like I had a priest in confession one time give me an NCR, a reporter article in confession.
Penitential.
I think I was there at the same time then, or around the same.
Really?
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh yeah. This was this past year, right?
This might have been 2 years ago. This was when I just started working at Illinois Right to Life when this happened.
Okay. Gotcha.
But it could very well be the same priest. I'm sure we're going.
I'm sure
to
we're
the same
talking
place
about the
for
same
confession.
place.
Yeah, we are.
I know Catholics figure it out.
Dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun.
Everybody's got a confession story from this one particular place.
And I mean, I don't know if
True.
I don't even know if it's
Chicago
the
confession.
world for like the reporter to say whatever they want, right? I think it's bad to be disingenuous, right? And to appear as something you're not. You know what I mean? Like if you want to be like a dissident Catholic journalist, come out up front and say, hey, you know, this is where we are. We're trying to change the church in these ways, blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, I don't know. I find that, I won't say appealing, but I find that a little better than like trying to sort of pretend you're non-biased. I don't know.
I think, again, Marty, like I see what you're saying, but I think it's more complicated than that because I don't know that the National Catholic Reporter necessarily sees it that way. Like, I think that they think like, sorry, we're like totally blasting them, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
No, it's very relevant.
As we see it.
I think, yeah, I think that they like, I don't think that they see it that way as like what we're doing is like groundbreaking and progressive and revolutionary. I think that they think they're just speaking the truth. And that's where the problem comes in is like, we inherently as a society look at journalists as like delivering a message of truth, or at least that's in theory what we expect of them. Now we know practically speaking that that's not always what happens.
Sure.
But like we, as a society, the expectation for journalists is that you deliver the truth to the public. So as a Catholic, if you don't have any prior information about the National Catholic Reporter, you'll go on their website, see the word Catholic, assume this is a Catholic media, this is a Catholic newspaper.
Right.
They're going to tell the truth. And then you just have that assumption. But again, I think like what you're saying has a hint of truth to it in the sense that like they're being honest about where they're coming from, hopefully. But on the flip side of that, it goes back to this idea of like relativism is not truth. Like truth is truth.
I mean, it's a fair point for both sides though, too, because I mean, ultimately it's an ideology that's influencing it. Right.
And ultimately, I think it comes down to we have to remember that people are behind all these words, right? And that there's just like there's on this screen right now a conversation going on with apparently disagreeing viewpoints and different perspectives and biases about these newspapers. Like, I think if we talked it out long enough, we might actually come to an agreement, you know? And so I think that
I think we're all agreeing that bad NCR is bad NCR.
I think we do.
Agree.
Yeah.
I think we do all agree.
If there's anything we can agree on, it's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to Mary Kate's point, I think is that like they I'm sure firmly believe, and I know the people who read that NCR firmly believe that is like that's what the Catholic Church should be. That's what those are the focuses should be, and they have the best takes, and they're exposing the truth, and here's all the things. Here's the things we should be talking about. There's nothing that they firmly believe that is, and perhaps that's why they didn't take Catholic out of their name. Is they're like, we're doing the right thing. It's the right place.
Well, I could say too, having been sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Kev.
No.
I could say too, coming from the exact opposite end of the spectrum, basically being more sedevacantist when I first started coming back to Catholicism, but there are websites and organizations there that play the exact same gambit on the other end of the spectrum. You know, they'll take a story and then just you manipulate. It's like 95% good food or 99% good food and just a tiny bit of poison. You know, it's like it's the common analogy. That's what rat poison is. It's 99% good food and just a tiny bit of poison. And just that 1% of poison is enough to fundamentally change your entire viewpoint on the situation at hand, you know?
Yep.
So it exists on all sides, obviously. But right now we're talking about bad NCR.
You know, like we were just saying, they could just be confused
Well,
Yeah.
they're definitely
so-
confused.
Definition.
I'll bring up a counter example. It's an equally disliked group, right? You know, the whole Michael Voris crowd and church military. Yes. So,
Here we go.
and I only bring it up because they have a somewhat similar story to NCR, right? So they're very outlandish, right? And they say a lot of things that make people mad. And the local bishop told them to take Catholic out of their name, right? Similar.
Oh, really?
story. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't.
So
I'm really glad you guys know the history of these things because I don't. That's interesting.
So what
Sorry,
they
Marty,
did
keep
was
going.
they changed their name from whatever it was before to Church Militant and took the Catholic out.
With Saint Michael
and
Media
then
before.
became
They heeded the
very
bishop.
upfront about their biases, right? So they continue to do what they do. Some people like it, some people don't. But I at least find that type of perspective, you know, less disingenuous than trying to still pretend that, you know, you're being Orthodox, you're being Catholic and whatnot. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, and I think there's something to be said about obedience as well. I don't know. At least when we're talking about like the Catholic media stuff.
I agree. That's interesting. That's interesting that he meaning Michael Voris heeded the bishops on that. Shoot, I was going to ask a follow-up question to that.
It's funny, both groups equally hate Bishop Barron, so that's kind of fun. They can agree on
that
one
actually
thing.
is kind of funny. Oh goodness, what was I going to ask? Darn it. What were we talking about right before that? So those are obviously Catholic media sources, and I would say that like it's interesting. Right before we went live, I was reading a post that Father James Martin had posted about the churches taking federal money during COVID, like relief money, and Bishop, oh my gosh, listen to me. Father James Martin, praise God, he's not a bishop.
James Martin for bishop.
He had, I think, presented a really solid defense for why secular media was wrong in the way that they were portraying this whole issue, which I thought was really interesting because generally speaking, I would not look to Father James Martin for anything regarding church news, but he did like a pretty killer job addressing why they were so far off base. And I think that there's like an interesting conversation to be had here about the way that secular media specifically portrays Catholicism. Another example that comes to mind is I remember after Notre Dame burned, that priest, do you guys remember that priest went in and took the host from the church and like rescued Christ from
thorns and everything?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. He had the crown of thorns too. And I remember reading an article on CNN that was trying in a very, they failed miserably trying to explain the Catholic. Did you read this, Tim?
Yeah.
Trying to explain the Catholic perspective on the Eucharist. And I like honestly laughed out loud at it because it was so incorrect and like poorly worded and just like totally missed the mark.
A hard thing to explain. I mean, I feel like
I mean,
when you put into words, it's kind of like it's a pretty wild thing if you're not familiar with it, which is why one of the reasons why I love it so much.
Which is so awesome because can you imagine a secular journalist sitting there like, how do I?
Exactly.
You know. But so I think that's really interesting that like this is a regularly occurring phenomenon. AOC with Father Damien of Malachi. That whole thing. The secular world continues time and again to portray the church totally incorrectly. Like I honestly believe that, and I think we see it with Father James Martin, NCR, bad NCR and good NCR would stand together in saying that secular media has no idea what they're doing when they're trying to report on the Catholic Church.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not so sure about that.
Why? Okay. Argue with me. Tell me why that's wrong.
Well, I mean, you've just seen the bias. Well, there you go. The bias. You've seen the bias bent in a lot of examples. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I get the impression many times, and okay, I don't want to keep knocking on bad NCR, but I get the impression most of the time when I'm reading that they would rather I mean, it's hell bent on being a politically liberal
Yeah.
report. I mean, institution essentially. That's the exact flavor I get from it. Whereas from other maybe Catholic, if they're Catholic news media outlets, they don't necessarily take a conservative view per se politically. They just, espousing church teaching just naturally correlates to a conservative view politically.
Like what? Name what's one of those sites? Because
more generally. Well, I would say NCR. The other NCR does a pretty good job of it for the most part.
CNA.
CNA, yeah.
Yeah, CNA. And there's a couple.
Website news.
No, okay.
I'm kidding. It was obviously a joke. It was obviously
a good one.
That would be an example to the opposite. LifeSite News is an example to the opposite. They play the common conservative Republican.
It's a story that bums me out because they actually, when they were actually LifeSite News, and they reported on pro-life news. They were like one of the only groups that really reported it, and they started off there, and they really kind of found this niche, and I would read them, and like I thought it was pretty good. But then they got into this like clickbait. I don't know if it was
the clickbait thing. It's poison.
The same thing happened to Taylor Marshall, to be honest. I mean, it's like they just get poisoned and triggered by this toxic environment that they get in, and they don't shield themselves from that, and then they turn into something that they're not, and they lose whatever they started at.
What are you gonna say, John?
I was gonna say that I don't think that Taylor Marshall is like, I don't know if you're accusing him of intellectual dishonesty, but
I'm not. I'm accusing him of being triggered and now dividing the church. But that's another conversation.
Yeah. Well,
y'all aren't ready for that one.
I think if we had placed bets that it would get to this point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing about
heavily on myself.
What's interesting though is
I would vote heavily on myself.
Sorry, John. Keep going.
I think it's a good example of a news source that has the conclusions that are, biased, and often, and they're drawing the conclusions from the facts. But a lot of times it's really interesting because they report things that I don't find on other news sources. So even though they're pretty provocative titles, it's like, I'm not hearing this anywhere else. And then when I follow the link, it's to a legitimate news source. And it's like, well, I mean, the original text, and it's like, it's another case of like, well, I don't know. Is it bias? Is it? I think the conclusions oftentimes are biased, like the reporting, but it's kind of cool or kind of useful to see the.
I would agree with John's point, and I think that is I think that's the common draw to, Taylor Marshall or the Michael Voris or some of the other websites. I mean, I can't speak for it all. I would say for myself, I do read or listen to some of those sources because I would agree with John. I think they talk about things that other people aren't talking about. And I think it's important to talk about it. I don't always agree with the way it's espoused. I don't always agree with, the overall tone of all of these things. But I mean, and in saying this too, I honestly think it's fair to say that every once in a while, like, it's not altogether bad to read something from National Catholic Reporter too, because you can't necessarily say that every single thing that they do is absolutely outright wrong. Talk about
I have so Mary Kate, to your earlier point about the secular media not really doing a good job of reporting on Catholic stuff. I don't know if that's always the case. Sometimes when things spill out into the secular media, I don't think the Catholic news media world does a very good job of criticizing itself. Like if you think about the original sex abuse scandal, when it was, the Boston Globe that broke everything, it wasn't any sort of LifeSite News.
That's a really good
church
point.
militant.
Yeah,
that's a great
church.
example.
It wasn't EWTN News that did that, right? It was this horrible thing spilled out into the secular media, and now change and stuff happened. So
I think and I think the Boston Globe handled that story as well as anyone could have possibly handled it.
Right. I don't know. I could be wrong about this opinion, but I'm of the mindset that most of the secular media really doesn't care that much about the Catholic Church. It's only when something really bad happens that they can sensationalize that they'll report on it. Hence, when it spills out into, hold on, let me finish. So hence, when it spills out into the secular world, something pretty bad probably happened that needs to be reported on. I could be wrong in that. It's just sort of a hot take.
Especially when there's people with an inherent need for drama, and then they use something so like incredibly holy, the church on earth, and then they dive right into it, and it's like pearls before swine, you know, like what the heck.
I think there's a lot of reporters in the secular world that see the church's continued influence and would be happy to see it diminish, and so are fine reporting the bad news. Well, I mean, bad news is always more popular than good news, right? But
yeah, unfortunately, we all know that.
I think that the latest the thing about the churches taking the loans, I think it's an example of I mean, how many groups probably took that loan without qualifying for it, or they shouldn't have, or
Planned Parenthood
did not, but like sure,
major universities,
yeah. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Like didn't Harvard take some? You know, like them and their $50 billion endowment.
All of the major.
Are you kidding me? But like, who gets the thing there? I mean, and with the sense of like, well, and you know what, and you know why they took it? It's because they're using it to pay off all these things, and it's like no.
Right. You got Stanford with an endowment of $40 billion, and they take money from the public.
Totally.
Don't see it.
And actually, Marty, I would even push back on that a little bit, that like, I think we've seen, especially in the Trump administration, there are so many Catholics who work in his administration that get called out simply for being Catholic. I mean, we've had in the last 4 years of Trump's presidency, the Knights of Columbus have been described effectively as a terrorist organization, which is so outrageous. Like, I actually do think that like, not every outlet, but like a lot of media outlets nowadays will use whatever opportunity they can to like pass a dig at the Catholic Church.
Well, they're an easy punching bag. Like, I mean, like name someone who's like, because anytime the church tries to defend herself in the public sphere, it's, well, you know, point back to the abuse crisis and now some of the financial stuff that's going on in some of the dioceses or church-wide, and it's an easy thing. So like, it's hard to defend, and and most people like don't care. It's like, yeah, whatever, the church can take it. I don't really care. So it's I think it's an easy you know, sacrificial lamb, pun not intended.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. There was something that was said way back that I wanted to comment on. I don't remember now. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So Zach kind of mentioned this. I'm curious, and like Kevin, you actually, and I say this like not even laughing, like you actually talk about this a lot, that like it's something that you actively in your life try to like quell your media consumption for the sake of like controlling how it affects your emotions. And that's for sure something I've done in my own life. 2016 election cycle, I was a freaking wreck. I was a nightmare.
Yes.
And I was like consuming media, like on Twitter, reading about politics every hour for sure. So like, how do you guys do this in your own life? Like, is it the kind of like, how do you keep yourself from being impacted by this stuff? And this actually kind of goes beyond, I think, just the physical act of reading the news. Like, the reality is there's a lot of crap happening in the world. I almost said a different word. There's a lot of crap happening in the world, and it's really hard to not allow that to dictate our emotions sometimes. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I'm a very emotional person, but
yeah, to answer your question, I mean, the more superficial level, like, or the more basic level, you know, which you'd be getting at, is talking about like, if you're somebody who, you know, consumes media like voraciously or, you know, very frequently throughout the day. I think honestly, for anyone, like, nobody really needs to keep up with current events that much. I mean, unless it's relevant to your job somehow, like, you trade stocks or something, or, any sort of really involved career path that you might have that has to do with the news, like working in news, maybe it's a different story. And in that case, you just have to be a different type of person. But I think number one, it begins with limiting your intake in general to media, because human beings obviously don't really fare well with this amount of stimulation. We've kind of seen that from, in a myriad of ways, I think, throughout the technological revolution and everything. But obviously, and this is where it applies to our faith life, the deep level is, going deeper in this whole situation, really, this is where we're called to be detached from the world ultimately, and to look for our peace in God, because you won't have peace on this earth anywhere else. There has to be, you have to have a prayer life cultivated. You have to be detached interiorly. And this is not somebody, it's not coming from somebody who's like achieved this by any means. But I think that's really the only way, because from my point of view, there's nothing to be gained from obsessively keeping up with world events, as negative and miserable as they are, especially right now within the church or outside of the church. There's absolutely nothing to be gained from that. Right. Why, what does it matter if
It's a very modern problem.
What's that?
It's a very modern problem. I mean, like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Like before, if we were living 150 years ago, like who knows what's happening in anywhere? Oh yeah, it would trickle across over 6 months. Oh yeah, this sickness that we're facing in this city. Oh yeah, it's actually all over the world. Holy cow! Right. Over all the country. Like, oh man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
For me, go. Sorry, keep going.
Oh no, I was just going to finish up by saying, like, to your point, it's a modern problem. And it's an absolutely human problem too. I mean, like, that's why gossip is, such a difficult thing to cut out of your life, because that's all, if you enter into a group of people and somebody starts, talking about one of your friends and saying like, oh, did you hear what happened? Like, the first thing everybody says is like, oh, what happened? It's not, it's just totally natural for us to want to know the unknown. And like somebody said earlier, you're always drawn to shock.
Totally. And this is like, actually, like the whole grasping at knowledge thing. First of all, side note, what I was going to say before that I forgot is about LifeSite News. I agree that I think they report on stuff that a lot of other outlets aren't reporting on. And Kev, if I recall, when you and Cullen and I had this conversation like 6 months ago on Slack, that was my primary argument, is that they report on a lot of stuff that other outlets don't report on. What I have noticed recently, because it's happened a couple of times, is that they have reported stuff out of the Vatican that's been unsubstantiated and then later has been disproven. Like there was something specific about the Pope. And I think that that's where this clickbait culture comes in, of like, I'm going to jump on this lead, or like this this tip.
Yeah,
and it's gossip.
I stopped listening to them within the past half, or stopped reading, because it was the same thing for me. I mean, just a quick tangent. Like I would get into some of their stuff because I think they still do have some good articles about, relating to latest pro-life legislation in certain areas, things like that. I mean,
nobody writes about pro-life legislation. They're the only ones. Yeah. Keep going. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where I started drawing the line, because they did say a few things. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was, but like John said earlier in the beginning, like things they said became unsubstantiated. And then at that point, like, I don't really have time for this anymore.
Right. You kind of have to throw it out after that, because you're like, now I can't trust that they are going about this in the right way.
Yeah.
There's pointing out, like there's redirecting to sources, kind of like what John was saying. Like if they redirect to sources, fine. It's when they start like reporting and opining on it that's like, okay, you've lost that's not what you started off with. I mean,
the only alternative is to sift through it, and ain't nobody got time for that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know what though? Like, I agree with you. That's why we read. That's why these things exist, right? Is because nobody has time to do this research on their own. But on the flip side of that, like, we are totally capable of doing research on things. And I have a huge problem with that when people just like take things at point blank. and don't do their research. And it's like very researchable stuff. Like, sorry, you guys, I know I'm a broken record, but like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, like it is so easy to do research and to see what their agenda is, but nobody's willing to do the research on their own. So instead they just choose to take CNN at point blank, and it's like, whatever. That's my
yeah. Well, it's so hard to do. It's so hard to do research nowadays, I think. I mean, where do you go with? So you're going from media to media to media, like to do your research, and you're going to your, I'm going to start off with Bishop Aaron. I'm going to go here and here, and you're going to have your path of like how you're doing your research, of, I don't know who knows how to do research these days. I mean, like if I do research, but I only stick to these certain sites, then I'm going to have this confirmed. But like, does research need to be across the board? Like, it's just.
No, I hear what you're saying, Kev, but I hear what you're saying, but I actually think that's kind of a misnomer, because like, for example, like I'll give you an example of how I did my own research on the Gates Foundation. So like, I have confirmed with my own research that the Gates Foundation has connections to the Chinese lab in Wuhan. This is not conspiracy theory. This is legit. And it's because I have been on the Gates Foundation's website and read about their connections to the Wuhan lab. I've also been on the Wuhan lab's website and read about their connections to the Gates Foundation and the grants that they've received from the Gates Foundation and the connections that they have to the Chinese Academy of Sciences, which
is
also
this just
has
coming out on TCI, because we might be on the news at some point.
No.
Let me do my hair.
This is all stuff that's been reported by the media. And this, you guys, this is why I don't like the phrase conspiracy theory, because all of the things that I just said have been called conspiracy theories.
Oh, I'm with you. Don't worry about it.
and here's the thing, like if I can validate it on my own by literally going to the Chinese Academy of Sciences website, it's not a conspiracy theory.
You're doing something different than what I'm saying. It's like you're going to like across, and you're like, and like these, if those sources, like that's okay, there it is. It's just I worry about the kind of research that people do, and it's I agree. Like if my research is I see something on CNN and I go to LifeSite News or Commonweal or something like that, and I'm like, oh wow, look at it says it here too. Right. It's confirmed. Like we have something going on.
Right.
Like what you're doing is
lead.
Yeah. And Kev, that was kind of my point is like,
thank you for saying that. That's
and I do think that, but to your point, I think that's how people think what research looks like is it's like, I'm just going to read every news source out there. And it's like, no, you have to think like a journalist. Like, where would journalists get this information from? They get it from the literal actual source, which is, the subjects of the story, whatever. So, and obviously we can't all get on the phone and talk to like freaking Bill Barr or whatever. I said freaking. It sounded like I said the F word. Holy crap. Sorry.
No, it didn't. He said freaking.
I didn't hear it. It sounded like freaking.
It sounded to me like I said it.
We're sinners. It's all right.
It's all right.
The gospel for cheapskates. Dang,
right.
Stand when you need them. So there was some, we're jumping all over the place and this is great, but I keep forgetting like some of the other stuff. We were talking about.
You've actually been speaking pretty smoothly this whole time because there aren't comments interrupting you.
Yeah.
The Zoom chat. Oh, yeah, I know. So I think we were talking before though, when I circled back on LifeSite, but we were also talking about like just the emotional perspective of it. And I think something too, like to take it even a step further than what you said, Zach, is like, I think there's like a grasping and a little bit of like a control issue with regards to like this desire that human beings have to just like know everything. And like we can grasp at knowledge that doesn't belong to us. And so I think that that's where we really get ourselves in trouble too. And I think that's like this whole culture of just like incessantly consuming stuff that's on our Facebook feed and then sharing it as a result. It's like, you don't actually know if that's true. You're just sharing. Again, this is your like your slogan, Kev, not your slogan, but like your thing that you say all the time is just like that people just repeat what affirms what they already believe. Like you're living in an echo chamber.
That's me. I coined that phrase. So anytime you say echo chamber, I get royalties. So say it as much as you'd like.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just think there's like a serious moral issue at play there of like, or how, to what extent am I grasping at information that doesn't belong to me? And like, that's been the big thing for me with a lot of the stuff going on with coronavirus. Like there was a point when all of this started that I was like falling down these like deep Reddit holes of like actual conspiracy theories. And I don't even really, like I said, I don't really believe in that phrase, but like actual just pure theories that people had. And I was just like trying to grasp at some sort of explanation for what was happening. And I recognized at that point that like, this is not only is it toxic, it's sinful, because I'm grasping at information that God just simply doesn't will for me to have.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to like,
let me just stick with the bad soup story. This is
yeah. Yeah. Like I just like, and that's like a lack of trust, right? Like that's like a control issue of like, I need to feel like I have some control of the situation by like knowing what's happening. And the reality is like, that's not the human experience.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting to think of like how far actually the things that we read about in the news is from our actual experience meaning like our senses, like that's the starting point of all knowledge. And it's like it's questionable whether you can even call these things that are reported, like in what sense are they actually facts to us? They're not like, I mean, David Hume's criticism of religion or miracles was that we don't really know what happened with Christ, for example, rising from the tomb, because none of us actually saw it. And the only way to really know is to see. Right. And, but like, we believe stuff all the time from other people. And I think we should, right?
That's interesting.
Because it's based on testimony. And testimony is a legitimate thing. And obviously most people that are irreligious also think it's a legitimate thing to some degree. So it's just a question of like making sure we keep it human sized again. Like there are humans making arguments or pointing out things, and to engage the arguments rather than the news source. Like I think we should be more concerned about what's actually said than who's saying it. I know that sounds really idealistic, and it's really idealistic.
To your point, John, I think that there's like something to be said for the fact, like the big thing we hear nowadays, especially with regards to anything scientific, is like, well, that's anecdotal. That's not, like we can't actually rely on that. That's anecdotal. Yep. But like the first 200 plus years of Christianity were based on stories of people's personal accounts. Like that's how the apostles evangelized people, is it was like, okay, now you're the 12, now go out and tell people what you saw,
Yep. Which is effectively spread today, same way. I mean,
yeah, which is really interesting when you think about it, because that is considered to be like the least reliable source of information nowadays, is like a person's personal experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just not good understanding of research. Like any good research you read is going to have both a qualitative and a quantitative aspect to it, right? So you're going to have the data points, and then you're also going to have the perspective from interviews and so on. It's got to have both to be very legitimate. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But again, like, what were the data points that the apostles were pointing to?
I mean,
lived experience.
Yeah, right. Lived experience. I mean, I think
the scriptures.
The big thing, this is going kind of down a different path, but I mean, like the reason that was so it's convincing to us historically actually is because it spread so far and so wide and so quickly without any force backing it, under persecution, actually, in fact, under the exact opposite of, it was a different time than today, because, that message was openly being persecuted, and yet it still spread essentially throughout the whole world within, several hundred years, the whole known world, rather.
Right. I mean, the data points, there's corroborating evidence between multiple eyewitnesses that,
yeah, that's fair,
as well as other historical accounts, non-Jewish. So like that's
fair. You're right.
Even though they have different perspectives.
Yeah.
And the significance of the fact that they died, that's a very powerful testimony that they died for it. It'd be one thing if they said it and then somebody threatened their death, like, oh, never mind, I forget it. and it's not very convincing. The fact that
Yeah.
all but one of them died for it.
Even died
I-
joyfully.
But like Zach, you made the comment that like it was a different time. It was a different time, but I actually do think that that same thing is happening now. Like I don't know that we experience, at least not in our country, we don't experience like the physical, the bodily death so much as like people who really stand up for truth in like the hard and painful ways. Like there's like a death of credibility, a death of reputation. Like I think you're one of the true, like, I don't want to use the term chosen, but like God has a will for you in the public sector if you are able to like speak blazing truth and not get totally like outcast for it.
Preach it, Howie.
Can you hear him? he's always here. Now I don't know what he's barking at.
Make sure somebody's not breaking into your house.
Probably. That is, yeah, he's protecting us, obviously. I like Derek's question. Have you guys thought about this at all? Do any of you think there's a Catholic news source that's doing it best? If you could create a Catholic news source from scratch, what would it look like? What does it look like?
I think, yeah, there it is. Even with Dan out here. I think CNA is my go-to right now. That's who I think they do the best job of doing this. I think what John was alluding to of really just laying out, here's the facts. I think they do as little like opining on it as they can. I do think that there's sometimes you'll see some like there's some selective omissions, or there's some like ways they phrase things that like, okay, fine, but like that's very much nitpicking. But I think they're the best ones right now, and it's funny because like I've met people who are like, oh man, they are so unbelievably conservative. Like CNA is just in the hands of the bishops and in the hands
so
pockets
funny?
of Trump. It's funny to you
In the pockets of Trump.
I'm dead serious. Like I've heard that, and it's
Right.
so I think they are the best. The best. I think they're the ones who I rely on. When they report on something, I'm like, okay, that's probably true. I'll keep my eye out. And sometimes they, I think they're also very quick to print to retract something if they get something wrong or whatnot. I'd say they're the ones that I go to. They're the kind of the best ones in my view.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually agree. I agree. Who else? Every once in a while. I mean, like there was a good period of time when I would still keep up with, honestly, Church Militant. I'll admit it very openly, because they still report a lot of stories that aren't talked about elsewhere. Not so much recently, but yeah, I would side with Kevin and say good NCR and CNA are good sources to go to. And I'll go a step further too, actually.
National Catholic Reporter.
Good NCR.
Oh, okay.
National Catholic Register.
Not bad NCR.
Okay.
It's good and bad.
I actually like EWTN. I like Raymond Arroyo. I think he does a good job.
Raymond Arroyo.
Yeah,
I love them.
I mean, they kind of have their,
He's solid, man.
But
He is solid.
I think they do a pretty decent job.
I agree. Also, actually, I don't know if he's EWTN. I know he has a YouTube channel, Patrick
Madrid.
Madrid.
Or Coffin, which one? Patrick Coffin.
Oh, both. Actually, both are great.
Yeah.
I think both are good.
They made their name on radio, like Relevant Radio or.
Patrick Madrid
Madrid's
is on
Relevant Radio.
Patrick Coffin, I think, has his own.
He's
Patrick Coffin was an
now.
old
He's
Catholic Answers guy.
wasn't he?
an OG Catholic Answers guy. Yeah, and he left.
Nice.
And while we're talking about it too, so I mean, Tim made the comment, but the Pints with Aquinas, Matt Fradd, it might not always be like super modern or super, current news, but Matt Fradd kills it with his content.
He totally does.
Always super authentic Catholic, not afraid to talk about anything, but he also brings on just, I call him like the Joe Rogan of Catholic talk show hosts. I think he's awesome. Like he brings on.
Well, he asks great questions. He interviews very well.
Great questions, and then he's just unabashedly Catholic. Like he's not afraid to stand up for what he believes, and
he's got an awesome accent. He's solid. Australian, so
Right.
Yeah, and an
Fred,
awesome
this is
accent.
points with
Now he's got a
coins.
sick beard too.
Yeah, he does.
With the coins.
Yeah.
What
She's
more do
really
you need?
she's channeling that Byzantine thing.
Oh, that's cool. I
Yeah.
didn't know he had a beard now. I haven't watched him in
Yeah.
a while. Nice. You know what? I think it's been cool in COVID to experience, like, now that so many masses are being broadcast. Not that I think we should continue that, because I think people need to get back to church. But one of the upsides has been like the rare occasion that a priest does talk about something that's going on in current events in their homily, and it finds its way into other medias because it was so great. That I think is like something that we as Catholics need to think about. Like, why is that so? Like, I'm thinking of one video in particular. I wish.
Father Mike Schmitz.
No, it wasn't Father Mike. There was a priest.
Or Jonathan Meyer.
Yes, maybe it was Father Jonathan Meyer. He gave a homily that was super pro-life. I don't remember.
It was after the March for Life.
Was it? Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that's
yeah.
just an example of like, that was a great message that he delivered from the pulpit, and it was consistent with the truth. It was like hard hitting, talking about current events, what was actually going on. And it was like giving the laity some direction in like, this is where we need to be. This is how we need to be looking at this issue, which, like, if you want to talk about, first of all, what we should be hearing from the pulpit, in my opinion, and also what Catholics are looking for when they're reading the news, I think that's it right there, is like, what are the facts? What's the truth? And how should we be like looking at this as Catholics? Like, I don't know what more we need, you know? Why? What do you think? Why do you disagree with that?
Not an easy thing to come up with.
I mean, I'm very much against typically. I mean, any sort of political anything, bringing it to the pulpit.
Not political.
Current events, I think obviously it's you can't, especially when they touch the church. I mean, like the priests who ignored. That's a rude way to put it, but like maybe they didn't talk about the rioting that was happening when it was happening. I think there's times where like these things need to be talked about, or the sex abuse crisis. I mean, name the one, but I don't know, the current of, if you constantly go to current events, I don't know, there's something off about it. I mean, it's because you're the point of the homily is not to
you're not a news broadcaster.
You're not informing people like how to like look at it this a certain way. I mean, you're explaining the scriptures, and it's a liturgical action. I mean, you're trying. I think we could do I know, I mean, it might be super boring, but I think we do a whole podcast about homilies and whatnot.
I think we
might say this for later. Maybe that's a season 2 thing, but
you guys can practice homilies.
Yeah. Oh God, you don't want to hear it.
Ladies and gentlemen.
So yeah, I don't know. I had some issues with the Father Jonathan Meyer, because I mean I think he like applauded Trump from the pulpit, which yikes. I typically like the way he goes about a lot of things, though. I think he's a very gifted speaker and a good homilist. I think he's got he definitely has the teaching aspect down to it. But this is we're moving into a different area.
We are.
I'm mostly like, if I can bring it back, I love the second part of Derek's question of if you could create a Catholic news source from scratch, like what would it look like? Like who would you bring on? Would it be, just the news, or would there be, these opinion pieces, or would it be purely commentary, or like what would your news source, what would it look like?
I mean, for first question, like, would it be just print media? I mean, would it just be internet? Would it be something?
Well, I mean, I think it's part of it. I mean, if you're doing just print media, I mean, I think you're already off to the wrong start. But
not print necessarily, but like just articles, right? On your
it could be. Name your thing. If you think like that, two people mentioned that YouTube is their way they watch news. So if you're going to create a Catholic news source and you're like, you know what, I am just going to do YouTube, and that's my news source, and that's, I think, the way I'm going to do it. And I'll bring in people to do research and whatnot, but the way I'm going to deliver my news is going to be over YouTube. I think that's what we're, it's the whole thing. Like, what are you covering? How are you doing it? What's your team look like? It's a good question. I'd have to it's a kind of an on the spot thing, but I think I'd have to put a lot more thought into, but really answer it properly, but
I really believe that the reason we're seeing this like crisis of media the way that we are, that there's so much like slant in stories, is that people want to be told like, what am I supposed to make of this? So like the facts aren't enough for people. Granted, like I think I think in our heads, the average American, when they read a piece of news, if we like surveyed the average American and asked them like, what are you looking for from journalism? I think that on paper they would say unbiased news, but I don't believe that that's true. I think that the reality is that the way that our behavior would suggest that what we're really looking for is to be told like, okay, here are the facts and here's what you should make of it. Like, here's what the facts mean. And so I think like the Catholic, I mean, there is a correct.
You mean so people are lazy?
I don't think it's laziness. I think people don't see themselves clearly. Like, I think people think like, I'm just looking for the facts. And then I think they'll read like Breitbart and say like, Breitbart just gives the facts. It's like,
no, I think people are lazy.
Yeah, I would say people, it's out of.
But what is lazy about what I'm describing?
I also think that it's kind of like people they don't necessarily want to go out and look, and you have all these things.
Look for what? I don't understand what is lazy about that.
Look for your truth, your news, your information. Like, having to like search that out can be exhausting. And right now you're being spoon. I mean, we're being conditioned in a way by like, say like Twitter to like these quick boom in and out hits. That are just like, I think they're almost like they're conditioning our mind of like, here's how news is received, and here's what it is. Here's how you do news. And so it kind of is this cycle of, okay, this is how we have to do it now. And so now the Catholics are like, well, this is now the future. And instead of like, I would love to be able to suck for the church to be like, suck us back out of social media and just like, this is a terrible idea and let's just suck us back out. Instead it's, well, this is now the future. Everyone's doing it. So now we need to get in it and on it and try to transform it from within. And even that's not working. So
I was suggesting laziness only because when you have the facts and you'd rather have someone else give you what you should believe, like rather than thinking it out yourself, that's what I meant by lazy.
I see what you're saying, but I don't think that people, how about this? The six of us sitting here having this conversation about this topic, we're not normal. We're not the average person.
You don't say.
We're not average people. Like the fact that we care enough to sit and like intellectualize this stuff for 2 hours or like debate this stuff for 2 hours, like we're not normal people. Normal people are doing what you just described, Kev and John both. Like they're doing exactly what you described. They're choosing news sources that they quote unquote trust, liking them on Facebook, and then they're reading what those news sources put out and they're taking it as Bible truth. That's the average person. That's what they're doing.
I don't know. I mean, I think maybe you give us a little too much credit. Like I said at the very beginning,
I think so. I don't think you're right.
Is my YouTube algorithm picking me, or am I picking it?
You're not giving yourself enough credit, Marty.
I tend to follow the news sources I like, right? I'm not out there reading every other side of the aisle. So I think a lot more people would like to have these types of conversations. Not everybody, has a platform to do so. We're friends that are willing to talk with them about it.
I don't know. I think the millions of people who are clicking on Breitbart articles every hour.
How many of us have clicked on a Breitbart article?
But how many okay, no, that's not a good example. How many of us have shared it? How many of the,
I don't share anything. I don't share anything. I mean, like I'm hardly on any other social media.
So I'm referring to like the average Facebook user, which, okay, here's the other piece of this is that like, we are also in a generation that we all described, none of us said that we get our news from television. I was just talking to a priest friend of mine who lives with an older priest, a much older priest in his 60s. And he said that this priest only knows what's happening in the world if it's been reported by MSNBC. because that's the only news station that he watches. And if any conversation comes up that's about something that MSNBC didn't report, this priest doesn't believe that that is actually happening to the extent that people say it is, because MSNBC didn't report it. So that's what I mean when I'm saying like, we are not the average media consumer, because the average media consumer is reading there. And that's beside the point. The point is, with regards to, okay, so whatever. So let's say the average is somewhere between us and the 60 or the boomer, who's watching CNN every single day for, numerous hours a day. The average is somewhere in between, which is probably is closer to the truth. So if we were like creating a Catholic news source, you can't build something that, we just think is the right way to do it. Like, as Catholics, like our method should be like, our goal should be evangelization, right? Like, we should be actually trying to give people the truth. So to a certain extent, you do have to kind of feed into what people are already doing. Like, you have to look at people's behavior as opposed to just like, this is how it should be. Because you're not, which does suck, totally sucks. That's why LifeSite News is clickbait. That is why, because they're trying to evangelize and they're trying to do it in a way that people are actually going to consume.
Yeah, how Catholic media, or how just media in general looks today, it makes total sense. Like, it's frustrating, and
it's super frustrating.
I wish it wasn't that way, but like it all, you can trace it all and why it's so. I mean, there's part of it that plays on like human brain chemistry, on human interaction. Just there's almost a science to it. And like Marty said, that the algorithms. I mean, the amount of research and data that goes into those algorithms that make things pop up for you is just, it's kind of scary. And that, like, honestly, if there's a thing that will make me like finally be like, all right, I'm done with social media for good, is like those algorithms are like what are those actually doing to my brain?
Beanbag chairs
in a way that I have no control. And not to say that I control over many things. I know I don't. But that is like kind of scary. Like that. Like I'm with Marty on this one. Like, it's how much is it? What's forming what? Like I've admittedly blocked many people on Twitter. I've curated my page to look pretty much how I want it. So I see a lot of, I don't see a lot of, necessarily negative things or people that make me mad. But is that good for me? I don't know. It's the way it is. It's the way I've had it. And I think that's the way a lot of other people have decided to do it. I mean, the people on Twitter who like use the block button on Catholic Twitter is pretty high, including priests. And there's a lot of people who are mad that priests block people.
That seems dumb. Priests should be allowed to block people.
Oh, I agree. I agree, but it's the sense of like, it's like, oh, is it uncharitable? Like, I mean, like, what is can you block someone, in your parish? Now that's terrible. I think that's where it breaks down right there, of like, a priest has no responsibility. I shouldn't say no, very limited responsibility for anyone he comes into encounter with online. Whereas the people in his parish, he's responsible for their souls. So right. that's where it breaks down, of course. But
I mean, I think, we as Catholics have an advantage over a lot of the rest of the world, in the sense that we have kind of a built-in alarm system, right? So we consume a piece of news media, and it's like, does this jive with what the church teaches? If it doesn't jive with what the church teaches, then it's like, I don't know if it's a little alarm system goes off, right? And then you can go down, and then maybe you're uncomfortable with the church teaching, right? Then you can go down the rabbit hole of like, not a rabbit hole, you can go down the path of, okay, what's the philosophy that undergirds this Catholic teaching, right? So there's there's solid foundation. But, I feel like if you're not Catholic, or you're not like a very grounded Christian in some sense, you consume a piece of media, and why not believe that opinion, as the gospel truth, there's no kind of basis. I don't know. I just feel like Catholics, we're at an advantage in that sense.
Yeah.
We've got something.
We're lucky that we still have it, that it hasn't been filtered already through the media,
Well, yeah,
that's a potential, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, but like, I think to Marty's point, totally outside of the media, we have like a solid foundation, which is like the church that we can like always fall back on, and we can like take things from the media and like match it up and see that like this is consistent, this is not consistent, in the sense of like, I guess, like ethically or morally, like the way that news is being portrayed. Which, yeah, that's because it's the one true faith, fam. I'm seeing Kevin in the yeah. So it's 9:42. We answered Derek's question. You know, I gotta say,
there's a component of Derek's question that kind of goes into a Catholic news source, and it's something along the lines of like how much of it should be akin to like a watchdog kind of group. So like within the hierarchy, there's a kind of a watchdog group. The Office of the Inquisitor became the Holy Office, which became the CDF, and they kind of deal with hierarchical doctrinal concerns within like the priesthood and everything. But should a Catholic news source also play a watchdog kind of function, like who's watching the watchers kind of thing? Part of me wants to say yes, because when we don't, then we get something like the Boston Globe, a secular news source busting the Catholic Church and putting it in a light that, you know, while there's very true and it's a good thing, you know, other news sources pick up on it and things become part of like misinformation and or that treat the church with irreverence. The part of me wants to say that there should be some sort of like watchdog component to Catholic media outside of the hierarchy, and that's a hard one. That's a hard pill to swallow for me.
Well,
and I believe
both ways.
God always weaves that into history. If you look back, you know, across the ages, there's always been, you know, oftentimes, you know, in the early years, it's been within the church, you know, other churchmen calling out the hierarchy for misgivings, and other times it's, you know, been the more political institutions, the monarchies, or, you know, lay people in some cases. But I mean, like, I just have to, I agree with you, Tim. I think, you know, something like that should be built in, but you can also start playing a very dangerous game when you're, I don't know if this is necessarily what you're saying, but like when you institute a secular commission, so to speak, to like watch over the church, because that's like, that could probably go a bad way too.
Well, that's an interesting,
like, maybe not watchdog, but maybe watch dogs, like multiple groups.
Watchers that watch the watchers of the watchmen.
Well, I mean,
I know what you mean.
You sort of set up one body that's kind of making sure their hierarchy is doing what they're supposed to. That could become as corrupt as anything else, right? But
well, I think it's what we're currently seeing. Like, I would bet my life that if you ask Taylor Marshall and Michael Voris if they perceive themselves as being like sort of a watchdog, if you want to use that term, of the hierarchy, both of them would say yes. And here's the thing. In a certain sense, that might actually be true, that they are kind of doing that. But because they're claiming that role, they are now subject to a particular moral level or like value that other sources of media, we don't hold them to that standard. We don't talk about CNN reporters the way that we talk about Taylor Marshall. We talk about Taylor Marshall's approach and whether or not he's being charitable and blah, blah, blah. We do not talk that way about these other secular media. So I think that's the risk that you run with that.
That's okay. We should have that kind of scrutiny if folks are taking that role.
I don't disagree, but I think then like cognitively, because we take that approach, I think then we give ourselves an excuse to disregard what they say. Like we hear this all the time with Taylor Marshall, right? Like his approach is bad. He's aggressive. And I mean, it's not always bad, but a lot of the time it's really bad. He's aggressive and can really feed into the drama and the gossip. And so people will choose to use that as a reason to discount or disregard what he says. But that doesn't necessarily discount the validity of what he's actually saying. The content has to be separate from, the approach. And that's kind of, I think, the issue there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry, Tim, I interrupted you before.
I mean, I genuinely don't know about the watchdog component of it, because I also believe that like having a watchdog who's constantly watching the church, who's also like watching the rest of the church, it lends itself to like a culture of critique. I don't think it's good for us. Constantly critiquing each other and thinking about it. And it's for that reason that I used to watch Church Militant, Taylor Marshall every day, and I haven't watched them in over 6 months. I haven't watched a Bishop Barron video either.
Wow.
I don't consume anything because part of it is like looking at me and like, what's the point of consuming Catholic media if I don't pray this every day? It's like I'm like not fulfilling my role.
Yep.
I'm kind of like in that kind of like mindset right now, where it's like, okay, now I'm just like kind of somewhat of like a media fast a little bit. I watch some things, but getting myself in like the right headspace to be able to like consume these things, and then like trying to grasp like what ought they to do.
Yep.
Just on principle, but also knowing that we're fallen people, and that critique kind of does have a negative effect on us.
That's a great,
for that.
just a side note, if anyone is struggling with consuming media and whether or not, discerning fact from fiction, St. Louis de Montfort, I think I read recently, I think it was him, said that anyone who prays the rosary every day will not fall prey to heresy. So there's the trick.
Pray rosary.
Kevin, was that a face of doubt?
I will never doubt the rosary, but I know some people who do that, and
okay. Well, that's a topic for another day. Cool. Wow. What do you guys think? We got anything else in the chat? This was the smoothest conversation we've had, but there was a lot less comedic relief.
Oh no!
I'm sorry.
John.
I feel like I
John and Dan.
I tried.
Is perfectly
but
perfectly fine. This is good. This means we have like a good balance.
One night.
It's
Not
good.
you, Haynes.
What'd you say?
My fault.
We could do without John.
Not your fault, John. Oh my gosh, that was not meant to be an insult to anyone here.
We just had a super intelligent and smooth conversation. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys.
We had an extremely intelligent.
It never happened
like for
again.
once we actually had like a very seamless flowing conversation that was like somewhat articulate and intelligent. You know?
Yeah, 100%.
This will get downvoted so many times,
Yeah.
That's why nobody's watching right now.
Oh no, is that true? Oh dang.
Oh, it's not about the ratings. It's not
about the numbers, Mary Kate. It's not about the numbers.
I know. Hey, that's my thing. It's not about
Can we come up with like some awesome clickbait title for this, that can really get us out there?
I mean, that's what we usually do. Last week I titled our podcast episode "Cancel the Cardinals," which Kevin actually said, but
if you watch TCI, you won't fall prey to heresy.
Nice.
Oh, that's good.
There it is.
I like it.
That's it right
That's
there.
it.
Boom. Nice job, Zach. So some housekeeping notes is that next week will be our last episode of season 1, what we're calling season 1.
Whatever this thing is.
Yeah.
What are we doing? What is this even?
I don't know. We're doing what other podcasts do. What other good podcast media, what they do. We're just following their footsteps.
Yep.
So
so season 1, season 2, we got like a whole list of great topics that
we've got a really killer topic for next week too.
Yeah, we it's so amazing.
Wait, what's our topic next week?
We can't even.
No, we can't tell. We can't share it just yet. It's that amazing.
Wait, I don't even know what our topic is for next week.
Come on, Mary Kate, be chill about this one. Don't let them know we don't have a topic yet.
Just gonna let the spirit speak, and just talk about whatever. It's
That's what we usually do, and then we'll just fill whatever open spots we need to fill 2 hours before.
The Catholic response to Jeffrey Epstein.
Ooh, wow. What?
We've been asked.
Okay.
We've been asked repeatedly to talk about Pizzagate, and
Oh my gosh!
Not seriously.
You know what? I'd be down.
No, actually, someone actually seriously wanted us to talk about it. I don't even know what I would say about that.
I don't know. It's resurfacing right now, though. It's relevant again.
It's very relevant.
Pizzagate.
I don't know how to.
I feel like we
that
should
stuff I don't follow at all.
Somebody pray.
Oh, who wants to pray?
I have a prayer. It's from
Nice.
the Daughters of St. Paul, they have like a media apostolate.
They do.
They have a prayer. So they have
Perfect.
several prayers,
Sick.
and this is just one of them. So,
They
Beautiful.
have several prayers. Great.
So, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
God, to communicate your love to men and women, you sent your only Son, Jesus Christ, into the world and made him our master, the way, the truth, and the life of humanity. Grant that the media, social communication, press, film, radio, television, internet, and all forms of digital communication may always be used for your glory and the good of all. Raise up vocations for this multimedia apostolate and inspire all people of goodwill to contribute with prayer, action, and offerings, so that through these means the church may preach the gospel to all peoples. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Beautiful. Thanks,
I
Dan.
think we really failed ourselves because no one here said, when Derek asked what the ideal mode of Catholic media is, no one here said the current format that we are presently participating in, which I personally feel is a pretty good media format.
I don't think Zoom's been established as a media format, or like a news media.
No, I don't mean
Don't
Zoom.
know.
I'm not talking about Zoom. I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding
I
because I actually do think that this isn't news, but it's media, what we're doing right now, live streaming a conversation about X, Y, or Z topic.
So
This
we're
is the same
we're
conversation
part of the problem.
you'd be having if you were sitting around drinking at a bar, like that's why it's cool though.
That's the appeal.
It is cool. It is very cool.
None of us have any authority whatsoever, and that's why it's
None.
awesome.
None. We have literally
Huzzah.
zero authority.
Please have mercy.
That's why
on
we're
us for
also
the things we
relaxed
say.
about it. We're like, I could
Oh,
be
I
right.
know.
I could be wrong. I was gonna swear. What's
Wow,
wrong
it
with
was
me?
hard for you to say it wasn't a Mary Kate. I could be wrong.
No, I was actually
I guess impossible.
Wow.
That's not what I was
Okay.
gonna say.
I was actually gonna put an expletive before the word wrong, and then I
Wow,
realized,
you're
why
in a
am I
very
doing that? I
sweary
don't know
mood
why
tonight.
I
Yeah.
know.
Intensify.
I
Because
know.
she's
I don't
wearing
know why.
camo. She's feeling aggressive.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. Also,
Feeling
none of you
aggressive.
made a joke about whether
Tim
or not
knows
you
you
can
put on
actually
camouflage
see
and
me.
you feel
Oh yeah,
aggressive.
I know.
Yeah, I didn't even know you were wearing camouflage. So that means the camouflage worked. I was so I didn't even notice.
It
There you go.
blended.
Yeah, it's just-
It's just been a floating head the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
What's it?
There it is. I
An
was wondering
aggressive
if someone would
floating
make
head.
that joke. All right, cool. Well, guys,
All right.
till next week.
All
Our
right.
our great next week's topic. See you then.
It's
Cool.
gonna be amazing.
It's gonna be the best. Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right.